Good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started here. So I'm going to call to meeting to order this meeting of the Municipal Audit Committee. We are noticed today, October 16th, from 9:50 to 10:50 a.m. 10:50 is going to be our hard stop as there's another committee meeting shortly after. Let's go ahead and start with introductions.
Mark Littlefield.
Felix Severa, and then on the phone we have members Bronga.
Here.
And Constant.
Here.
Great. Okay, so there's really only one topic on our agenda for today.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Chair, I'm here as well.
Is that member Brawley?
Yes.
Okay, great. So we only have one topic on our agenda today, which is getting an update on the 2023 ACFR. So there should be a presentation if we can put it on the screens. And then I believe the presentation should be on the committee website for folks as well. It's just going to be a second until we get that presentation up. Great. All right, I'll go ahead and turn it over to BDO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hi, everyone. Joy Mariner. I think most of your faces I know, and for those of you online, I recognize your names as
And
well.
actually,
Please go ahead.
apologize. I messed up with our introductions because I don't have the typical agenda in front of me. So if we can also introduce our administration committee folks. So if any of you all are here, feel free to introduce yourselves on the record.
I'm Bill Palsy, the Chief Administrative Officer.
Scott Lee, Internal Audit.
Got it. I assume that our new CFO, well, you're the acting CFO right now, is that correct? Okay.
That is correct.
So you're taking both of those seats, and then, okay, great, thank you. Go ahead.
No problem. So hi, everyone. Joy Mariner. With me, I have Kelly Mays, who's our senior manager and has been very involved in your audit for the last few years. And then Stephen Schill, who's our market leader, but he's actually our managing partner for the entire West region, happens to be in town straight off the airplane today with us. So I thought it'd be good for him to stop by and just see what we're doing here with the municipality and be a support to us this morning. So welcome to Stephen. Welcome to Alaska. Really, my goal here today is to kind of walk through just a few quick highlights on the start of the 2023 audit. If you can turn, Matt, to kind of the introductory page right there, that'd be great. So this is for the 2023 audit. Nope, you can go forward. There you go. So we've been hired. We do work for the audit committee. We've been hired by the audit committee to perform the audit of the 2023 financial statements. Your audit actually entails multiple audits. So not only multiple standards, but also different standalone reports. So just to kind of remind you at a high level, we're following generally accepted auditing standards. We also follow government auditing standards, which are our higher level, more robust standards because you receive federal and state financial assistance. And then we do perform audits under the uniform guidance, which is the federal side, and the state single audit guide on the state side of your major programs compliance with your the terms and conditions of your grant awards. So those are actually significant pieces of your audit. And then one thing I will note as well is that we actually do submit multiple audit opinions to you as the audit committee. So we'll be sending you regular updates on those. Those include what we call the ACFR, which is your financial statements for the municipality as a whole. And then we also have the audits of Civic, which by the way is happening this week. AWU, which is issued as 2 separate reports, water separate from sewer. And then we also have Solid Waste Services, which is a combined report of refuse and disposal, Port of Alaska, and I'm missing somebody. And also the pension, the firefighter, the fire and police retirement pension fund, which that audit is completing or just completing this week. So those are all kind of part of the scope of what we perform as audits for the municipality. We also are engaged to audit the Anchorage Community Development Authority. And so that actual audit has been completed for 23 already. And then we also audit the Anchorage School District. So there's a lot of different engagements associated with that, which will kind of be reporting back to you as an audit committee, the results of those audits. So let's just very briefly go through strategy on the next page. Audit involves a lot of different things. A couple of key highlights here on the top left of this is that one of the things that's very important in the audit standards is that we assess your risks of material misstatement. So what is materiality? I get asked that question a lot. What matters? Well, materiality is different depending on the account you're looking at or the entity you're looking at. And really what we're looking at is something that could cause one of the users of the financial statements to be misled. And so we're doing a risk assessment around your books and records to determine where are the areas that are higher risk, moderate risk, maybe low risk. So for example, maybe payroll is not very complex for, some of your entities, but police and fire payroll can be pretty complex here at the municipality. So we might have a higher level of risk associated with one type of payroll than a different type of payroll. Also, we look for things that might be considered significant accounting estimates. So landfill closure costs, for example, are a significant estimate for the work that we do over at the landfill. We also are required to look at your internal controls. And when we talk about internal controls, I do like to remind my clients that an audit is an external control. It's a great control, but there need to be controls here at the municipality to ensure that the financial statements are fairly presented. So we look at the design of those controls and whether they're implemented properly throughout the year. And then we report to you as an audit committee items we identify that maybe could be more robust areas where there are weaknesses in controls or failures in controls. So let's kind of dive into a little bit more of the meat. If you can go to the next page, our scope, as I mentioned, there's several different opinions what we'll be issuing. The first 3 relate to government auditing standards. And then we have on the financial statements outlined on the next 2 pages, some significant risk areas. For those of you who read through the 200 pages of our issued 2022 financial statements and single audit reports, some of these will look very familiar. Some of the risks that we've identified relate specifically to areas of concerns from last year. Some of these are things that just as a municipality, they may be higher risk for you. So for example, on the first one there, fraud risk, management override, there's an inherent risk that somebody would override the control system you have in place if they wanted to. And so we look to see that the control procedures in place are robust, but we also look for specifically any evidence of management override. Where the next one here, grant revenue, there's also, risks related to existence of grant revenue. Are you recording costs that are allowable? Are you recording that grant revenue in the right period? And then you'll notice the next 2 are maybe a little bit more specific to the facts and circumstances from last year because there were significant reconciliation differences last year in your grant schedules. And there was so much FEMA money still being reconciled in 22. We have those there because we know you still have a lot of grants. Your team's fairly new in terms of, getting those books and records together you've had a lot of turnover in the finance department. So those are just maybe more specific. And then we tried to outline for you what our planned audit approaches are. So in terms of grants, we're doing a lot more of substantive procedures, actually just testing a significant number of the grants and tying those out to grant reports or to cash receipts. So I'm not going through every single one of these, but I did just want to kind of point out that these do generally tie through to what we reported in last year's audit report, but gives you an idea of areas where we'll be kind of heightening our risk and some of the procedures we may perform to make sure things are accurately presented. The other area that, and if you can go to the next page, I'll highlight the other major area of significant audit adjustment last year related to your leases. You did implement GASB 87 in 22, which is the new lease standard. And there were significant challenges with adoption of the lease standard, largely because you have so many leases. The airport in particular was a challenge, and also port. And so Kelly has already been meeting with your teams there at the airport and with the Port of Alaska. She's shared with the controller division all of the final lease schedules as we saw them. So they have good starting information. And then they're working through the second year on those calculations. They don't believe it to be a significant risk, but another thing to mention here is that you have a new standard in 23 for SBITAs, which are the software-based IT arrangements. We talked about that. It's GASB 96. And it's similar to the lease standard in that you still have to have a complete list of all your contracts with IT and evaluate whether or not any of those represent a right of use asset. By their very nature, similar to leases, they have to have more than a 1-year life in order to be considered an asset. And there's other criteria that they go through to do this evaluation, but your team, we've been sharing information as we have it with them. We've been sharing templates with them. They should be on track for that, but that is a big standard. And we do expect the municipality to have some SBITAs that do need to be recorded into capital assets. Other things here include financial statement presentation. We talked at length about the challenges with the actual financial statement draft last year and preparation of the draft, and have already been meeting with your team on things like the cash footnote. That was yesterday. Debt covenants. Kelly met with them yesterday. So I'm trying to stay ahead of those things and making sure that you're set up for success. And then Stephanie, who's your new controller, has pretty significant experience with both grants and financial reporting. So she's going to be taking the lead on the ACFR this year. At this point, BDO has not been engaged to assist with the draft of the ACFR. So I thought I would just bring that up. Last year, we did step in and assist with some of the financial statement preparation items. We do assist with the financial statement draft for, let's see, solid waste and port. And so we have already started that process on our end. Next item to discuss on the next page, we did mention GASB 96 here. We're going to be looking pretty carefully at impact of personnel changes in your control procedures, and whether or not there was a lack of segregation of duties in any areas in 23. 23 was the year where your accounting staff really was impacted by turnover. So there were, the concern there, were there any transactions where there weren't proper approvals or review happening? I did mention kind of debt and bond covenants. We're going to be looking at any debt issuances or bond refundings. FEMA is still high on our list. And then I know there's a goal of management to have the final MLMP entries out of the municipality. So there were still some final balances that had not cleared out. So we'll look at those if they're significant. And then I put two other things on here. There was, some items that showed up in our legal confirmations last year related to potential contingencies. Those are liabilities or legal settlements that might be outstanding. So we'll be working with legal and Bill and his team to make sure we have the right information on that. And then lastly, I think this is kind of Scott's life sometimes, is looking at procurement. I think there's a regular internal audit review of procurement, and that's something we'll be reviewing their reports. And also, we did have some areas that we reported as findings last year related to procurement. So we'll be following up on those findings to see if they've been corrected in 23. I'll just stop there for a second to mention that it's likely some of the items we reported last year will be reported again and for the 23 audit, as the timing of that audit made it such that it's possible they had not had a chance to remediate them until 24. So we don't know yet the extent of that, but just know that that's fairly common where you have these kinds of situations. It may take a couple years to resolve that. To the extent it's been resolved in 2024, your team can indicate as such in their corrective action plan. Already implemented, they can say this is something we addressed at this time. But if it did occur during 2023, we would still need to report it. I'm going to pause before I talk about single audit, because this is kind of the point in the presentation where there's a difference between the financial statements and then the single audit, which is your compliance testing. Do you have any questions about our planned scope for the financial statement audits, or any areas of concern that you as an audit committee may want to bring to our attention for us to look at more specifically?
Thanks. So I'll go ahead and open it up to the queue. I do have a few questions. I'll go ahead and get started while others maybe think of questions. Folks on the phone, please text me if you have any questions. So as I was looking through your presentation, I do notice that he used the word heightened quite a few times in your presentation. Should I be expecting a correlation between heightened and increase of time, or is that not going to be a correlation that exists? Like, are we expecting the audit to take longer because you're having to take heightened measures?
Thank you for your question. It's a good one, given 2022. So we are planning our procedures, anticipating this risk on the front end this time. And so that helps greatly. Really, the main impact is the sample size. So really, I would say, generally speaking, it doesn't take a lot more time to test 40 samples versus 60 samples. What takes more time is if the reconciliations we receive don't agree, or we get the reconciliation and there's a lot of errors in it, and so we have exceptions to our samples. Then we have to send it back, get them to correct it, and pick a new sample. And if that does occur, I'll bring that to the committee, or at least to the chair, to start, and you can and discuss any additional time that may take. That's what happened with the grant schedules last year. So I think we're just letting you know that there's a heightened risk given the history, or given the account or transaction itself comes with a heightened risk. But we're planning for that on the front end and building that into our sample selection or our audit approach. In some cases, we're using data analytics. So a lot of the industry now is pretty amazing for somebody who's been doing this for a couple decades. It's a big difference. Because you can take a lot of the SAP data, throw it into a Power BI system, and it'll spit out things that look riskier. So we're trying to employ, as best we can, some of those data analytic procedures to cut down on sample sizes, but also to narrow in on what might be the real risk. So for example, we might want to look at police, fire, payroll a little bit differently, and that analytic will show us how is it comparing to prior year. How is the pay rate, and it'll pull out anything that looks like an unusual, like a payout for somebody who's retiring, or some bonus or something. It'll give us the 6 weird ones instead of testing a sample of, say, 120 across the board. So we're trying to leverage that technology that BDO has invested in to be as efficient as we can with the audit process.
Great, thank you. Then it sounds like FEMA is going to continue to be one of the issues. What about ARPA? Are we over ARPA at this point, or is that still going to be an issue?
So we receive, in theory, your grant schedules on October 28th. So I haven't seen the numbers yet. ARPA, though, hasn't proven to be that difficult to reconcile or test. Pretty straightforward, and the way that the Assembly appropriated those funds is fairly straightforward, I would say. So I don't anticipate it's a higher risk program. The federal government has labeled it as such, but I don't think it's that complex to audit. We've audited it throughout the state for the last couple of years.
Great. And then next question for me is, so it might be a little bit too early for the administration to respond, but I'll ask the question. Does the administration intend to ask BDO to assist with drafting?
To the chair, I think that's still a work in progress. We are happy to report that it does seem like we're finding a lot of process improvements and efficiencies with our new controller. And so we're building the plane as we're flying it, but I don't have a firm answer for you yet on that particular question.
Got it. Okay, those were the questions that I had. Just gonna, nothing for you. Okay. Oh, no, all right. All right, don't see any other questions then. Please continue.
Great. The next pieces will be fairly straightforward. We do perform a federal and a state single audit. The federal side is now called Uniform Guidance. Can you go back one slide really quick for me, Matt? We also have a group audit, which because you're such a big group, under the auditing standards, you're considered a group audit. We do have a different auditor, a different partner at BDO who signs the opinion for the school district, although I am one of the reviewers on that file, so I get to do a cold review of the statements before they get issued. That's happening here in the next couple of weeks. So that's, well, within the next month or so, I think it's due November 15th. But this year, the PAC did decide to use a different audit firm, and they have not completed their audit yet for 2023. They're a December year end as well. So BDO will not be performing that audit. I just wanted to bring that up because in the past, we have never referenced recent history. We have not referenced other auditors in your opinion. So your opinion for 2023 will reference the work of other auditors for the first time in a little while. Next page is just some of the single audit risks. These really parallel with what we had as findings over the last year related to single audit, largely related to procurement and some reporting items. I don't think subrecipients will continue to be an issue, but because I don't think you have that CARES Act money still being spent in 23, but I haven't seen the details yet. We get the grant schedules here in a couple weeks. Okay, and then I do have a couple other highlight areas. Next slide, just to highlight for you and for the committee what we're using in terms of kind of audit quality and some of the systems and our approach. And so, BDO follows auditing standards, but we have customized methodology for state and local government, and then we're leveraging some of these tools. So there's a few quick highlights I'll cover on the next page. We use a lot. We use this global portal. So all of our requests to your team are on the portal. Every time we want something, we have a different portal for AWU, a different portal for solid waste, different portal for port. And your teams go on there and they say, oh, you want a payroll ledger? Here's the payroll ledger. They upload it there. It's a secure online portal. It does help a lot with project management. And then we're also using kind of some dashboards on our end to really look at the status of the engagement. We have a project management software that we're using this year to just keep a status of the engagement. So you may even see some snips in your audit committee packages with kind of the status update from the client side. And I know that Bill, that was one of the first things he asked for is where's our project management? What does it look like? What's the timeline? What do you need in order to get things done? So those are the tools we're using and leveraging for that. And then the next page, just to highlight a few other things, I'll go through these pretty quickly. We have a lot of automation that we use. So I never have to I do have my 10 key on my desk, but I never have to actually add up those things now. The computers all do it for me. We're trying very hard to link your documents automatically into our work papers. And also we use automated confirmations, for example. Those go automatically out where the banks allow directly electronically through to our audit file. Actually, it goes all the way. The request comes from our audit file and goes back into our audit file. So a lot less manual following up. Next page, we are using our data analytics to, can you flip one more page, Matt? Thanks. To test various things, but the two main ones to start off in the planning process is looking at preliminary analytical reviews, risk assessments, as I mentioned, kind of diving into accounts. Does this look right? Does this look different? What has changed from the prior year? What might indicate a risk to you as the municipality, maybe a cash shortage somewhere or a big unusual item. And then journal entries, because you're using SAP to document your entries, we can analyze your journal entries using a data analytic tool. We call it the journal analyzer. So those will pull out for us any entries that look unusual, anything that might be posted by somebody, on New Year's Eve or has just an unusual reoccurrence of a certain number. Those will pull out entries that seem higher risk. And then for you, because the last couple of years we've had some some entries that are posted off book. I don't know if you remember us discussing this last year, but some kind of what they're calling topside entries. Those don't show up here because they're not in SAP. But to me, every single one of those is considered a risky entry. So we do test those in total. And then just overall timeline, I think hopefully this is not a surprise to Bill. This is what we're aiming for. And I think this is right now still very realistic. We have started planning in September. Kelly has been over here frequently. Most of our preliminary walkthrough procedures have been performed. We've been doing IT assessments. We've been doing interviews with folks. We start the grant work here, hopefully on the 25th, 28th. I think we're supposed to get that grant schedules around there, the 28th. So the most of the grant work will kick off November 4th. And then we have kind of most of the field work here downtown happening in December and January, although I'm hoping we can start AWU in November. And that's kind of our plan. AWU first, then port, and then solid waste. Yeah. So we're hoping the standalone field work is all completed by the end of December. Standalones will issue AWU first by the end of January. They have an RCA deadline at that point, and then port and solid waste soon thereafter. And a lot of this is somewhat contingent on receipt of what we would consider to be milestone items. First one being the grant schedule. We talked with Stephanie about that yesterday. The second one being kind of footnote information, including cash and investments, PERS, leases, SEBITAs by the end of December. For most of those, cash has to be a little earlier because of AWU. And then receipt of the ACFR is probably the third one, the draft of the ACFR by the end of January. So we can issue by the end of March. So aggressive, but doable. And we have pulled in team members from the Seattle office because you're not normally in this schedule. I'm not usually bored this time of year. I actually have other clients that are typically here. So I have a Seattle team coming in to help specifically with the single audit. And I also have some partner support coming in to help me with review so that I'm not a backlog in the process. So BDO and Stephen's group, from a leadership perspective, is committed to making sure you have the resources on your audit when we're trying to do this catch-up year. The only other thing I'll mention is that it is our hope that we can start planning the 2024 audit in February to try to get the 24 audit back on track for issuance in the summer. So that means that we kind of start the same cycle again with planning in January, February. So then we'll have another meeting about the 24 audit that will sound very similar. Questions
Great.
about the timeline?
Yeah, I'll start with Member Constant.
Thanks. You just touched on it there at the end. My concern, of course, is what this all does to the impact for the 24 audit. And so if you start in January, February, what is the anticipated completion date for that?
Well, if you go with this kind of timeline that I would consider to be rather aggressive as a 7-month timeline, that means that we would be aiming to issue 24 next summer. I'll be realistic and say September. I would love it to be July. So I think that is largely going to be based on when you can close out your financial statements and prepare the draft of the footnotes in the financial statements themselves. That means, let's say we're aiming for July. That means we're getting the financial statement drafts early June. So I don't know how realistic that is, but I think a lot of it will just depend on the resources that the team has and some of the outcomes of the 23 audit.
Thank you.
Great, thanks. And yeah, I just did a little bit of comparison sort of year to year to compare the 22 timeline and the 23 timeline, and things like the ports and solid waste were issued in April and May, and now you're looking at issuing it much sooner. So yeah, that is quite aggressive, and it's much appreciated because the quicker we can get back to a normal timeline for the municipality, the better. Okay, any other questions, comments? Right.
Yep, and I won't spend very much time on the rest of the slides. I'm not really even going to go through them. Just know that Kelly and I are your key team. We have a army behind us. We also have an engagement quality control reviewer, which you have every year. But this year it's a big four partner that BDO has hired into into the Boston office. His name is Scott. So I'd love to have him join one of the update meetings with the audit committee here coming up, because he has been fantastic so far. We are really farther along than we've ever been at this stage. And he's come up with some great ideas on how to streamline things and how to document things. And so his input has been valuable as well. I also have in here, I promise not to go through them, but all of the upcoming standards. So that's kind of starting on page 22. I'm sure you don't want to know about all of them, but just know that the biggest one that's going to impact you, I think, is on page 26. So if you can go there, Matt, that would help. This is related to compensated absences. It will be in effect for 2024. And this is something that needs to be on your radar, because your team may have to come with, some ideas on how they need to adjust the way that you're recognizing accrued leave, accrued sick leave. And then if you follow state politics at all, that might even be impacted by the new state ballot measure that's on, I think, Prop 1. It's Prop 1. So just kind of keep that in mind. Compensated absences and the way you're accounting for them are slightly changing. And you do have some of these types of leave that maybe need to be considered for accounting impacts. Otherwise, I just want to just highlight for you, we do have some resources in the back around cyber risk, because it continues to be a challenge everywhere. And I know your IT team has been talking with ours about some of the risks in municipality just overall and how they're being addressed. And then I just want to remind everybody that I'm committed to making sure you're informed. I hope, and this is where really a question for you. Last year we tried, it wasn't necessarily every week, but it was almost every week to send the update. Some days it was a couple of days late. If I knew something would drastically change in the next day or two, I waited until it was updated. And then, direct contact with the chair where needed. We're happy to change that if it seemed overwhelming or it seemed like you wanted more information. I'm happy to increase or decrease that communication, but I just kind of leave that to the committee. We do work for you. We want you to feel informed, and we want to make sure that you're aware of status, risk areas, items of concern we've identified to date, and timeline. So we've tried to include all that in our updates to you.
Great. Thank you so much. So I'll go first, and then if any other members have any comments or questions. So when should we look at getting another update from BDO on the audit status? Should we wait until after you get the receivables and then you get a chance to look through those?
Yeah, I would say mid-November might be wise.
Okay.
We are anticipated to get the grant schedules by the end of October, and some of the grant details in that first week or two of November. I'm actually out for medical November 20th through December 4th. And so ideally we could meet before that happens, because we should have a sense if the grant schedules are working by that time. So
Great.
I can coordinate that through the clerk.
Okay, perfect. And then, yeah, since you brought it up, I really, speaking for myself, really do appreciate the weekly audit status updates. It provides for me sort of a good pulse of how things are going, and also it lets me do a little bit of comparison when you do send them out on a regular basis, weekly, sort of year over year, just to see how things are going. So I do appreciate the weekly updates from BDO for sure. Any other comments or questions from folks? All right. It sounds like things are not on fire, which is great. Sounds like things are moving smoothly. And so cautiously feeling more optimistic this year than maybe last year.
Yeah, so far things on track. I think, those weekly updates, I just want to kind of remind everybody, those are for the committee. And when we do our update here in person in mid-November, those aren't part of the committee packet information. I'll just send those updates out on hopefully Fridays, and then we'll refer to those for the meeting when we meet.
Okay. Not hearing or seeing anything else. That was really our only topic on the agenda. So I'll go ahead and move us over to audience participation. Would any members of the public like to participate? Do we have anyone on the phone? Okay. No one on the phone. No one in person wants to participate. All right. Then quick
Felix,
go.
I have an issue that I'd like to bring up, but it doesn't involve the outside auditor.
Sure. Go ahead. This is the perfect time to do that, Member Constant. Go ahead.
Thanks. So we have an audit report that's being presented to us on our agenda on Tuesday relating to P card purchases. And I just wanted to have a discussion about a difference of opinion on the finding that was made by the internal auditor relating to a purchase made by legislative services staff. And I was hoping that Matthew Farina would kind of walk us through that.
Sure. Go ahead.
Through the chair, this is Matt Farina. So there was an issue with a P card purchase to 49th State Brewery for an event for Nerd Night. Essentially, when our staff member booked the room, there was a deposit required of 50%. And this 50% deposit was for just over $1,200, and her P card limit was $2,500. Eventually, the total cost went through the $2,500 limit, and it was considered a split transaction, even though there was no expected that it would be over due to the 50% deposit being below her total. And that's the key issue where there's a difference in opinion. Since when she made the down payment, it was 50%. It was less than her limit. She believed that there was no issue making that P card purchase.
Great. Thanks. Did you have anything that you wanted to add, Member Constant?
I'm just not quite sure how I will respond in the context of the audit. It may be that I ask the members to return the audit for further analysis to the internal auditors on Tuesday, like a motion to refer. But I am still chewing on that action at this time.
Okay. Thank you, Member Constant. So for my part and in the role of this committee, we certainly don't get in the middle of any arguments between departments / branches and internal audit. But certainly if this particular audit needs more review by this committee, we would be happy to take that on if the assembly wants to refer it back to here. Okay, then with that, unless there's anything else, not seeing anything, then a quick meeting today. Thanks everyone, really appreciate it. We are adjourned.